So what's your story? It turns out that the narrative you tell about your life to date does not just describe your past, it also creates your future. And given that there are countless ways to tell each story as we look backwards, there are countless paths that we can chart as we move forward. Our guest today will help us understand how we can draw on the best from our past to inspire the present and create a better future. She graduated from the University of Chicago with a PhD in psychology and specializes in personal and relational transformation. She teaches at Grupo Campos Elíseos in Mexico City, is adjunct faculty at the Whole Being Institute, and serves on the board of directors of the International Positive Psychology Association. She publishes regularly in academic publications and popular media and is the author of Positive Identities that brings together positive psychology and narrative practices, a book that has significantly contributed to my life and to the life of many others. I'm thrilled to welcome my friend, my colleague, Dr. Margarita Tarragona. Welcome, Margarita. It's so great to see you here.
Wonderful, and thank you for inviting me, Tal.
So, how did you come to link positive psychology and narrative psychology?
It took a while. As you know, I've been involved in positive psychology for a long time, but initially it was just a body of research that was not very applicable. I remember very clearly many years ago speaking with Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and I would tell him, Mike, we have to apply this to therapy. And he said, no, we can't go too fast. There has to be a lot of research done. So on the one hand, I had that, and I was fascinated by it. And then I had my training in the world of therapy, and I became more of a practitioner. And for a long time, I saw these as two areas that I loved, but I didn't see a clear link. And then over time, I realized that positive psychology looks at what's best in people, what works well in people's lives. And the kinds of therapeutic practices that I liked the most had to do exactly with that, with focusing on solutions, looking at exceptions to problematic stories. So then I saw how they could be linked. They come like from different traditions, also philosophically, historically, but I think that at their heart, they are both interested in promoting what makes people lead fuller, happier lives.
So what would a therapeutic session look like if you were applying narrative and positive psychology?
Of course, it depends, but in general, one thing that I like to do is to have people fill out, for example, a questionnaire about their strengths, like the VIA questionnaire, and interview them about that. Not maybe initially, like in any therapy, we talk about what brings them here, what they're worried about. Though often, before we even get into that, I always tell my clients I like to get to know them a little bit as people and for them to get to know me. So I ask them what is most important for them in their lives, what helps them get up in the morning, what are they passionate about, what do they do best. And then we start to talk about what they're worried about. And I think that's like having like a background that doesn't make the problem any less painful, but it puts it in a different context. So then oftentimes what we do is when people sometimes come to therapy, they're often feeling stuck, and they often have a very restricted idea about themselves or about what's going on. So part of narrative work has to do with exploring either exceptions to what's problematic or additional threads in their lives that may contradict what's dominating.
So can you give me an actual example?
I was thinking of example. I was working with a person who came to see me because she felt she was having like a midlife crisis, and she felt she was not very good in her work, and that surprised her because she had always been a very bright student. She thought of herself as an intelligent person, but she thought she was very mediocre in her work. So we started to talk about that and why did she think she was mediocre, and then we talked about mediocrity and what mediocrity meant for her. And I asked her about whether there were other areas in which she didn't feel mediocre, and she started to tell me about other things, like she did a lot of community work and she loved it, and she realized, for example, she was helping a nonprofit organization, and she realized she was really good leading the efforts of the organization, and without even realizing it, she was organizing a way to make their delivery of donations speedier. So that was one example of an area in which she wasn't mediocre. So we spoke about what strengths were evident in that. So she said, oh, well, I'm a good organizer, I'm a good leader. I remember we used some Post-it notes, and she wrote down the things that she did well and how how she could use those in those activities. And little by little, and not really, it didn't take too long, just a couple of sessions, she realized she didn't really get a chance to use her strengths as much in the kind of work she was doing. And then one thing led to another, and she realized she was also very involved in her religious community and how she really wanted to do something that would contribute to that community. So it was pretty fast. She changed from a vision of herself as being a mediocre professional to seeing herself as very capable and very committed to really helping her community.
So basically what you did for her, you changed her story, you changed her narrative from I'm mediocre to actually I'm quite exceptional.
Right.
And if I'm exceptional in one area, why can't I be exceptional in other areas? It's suddenly possible. It's in the realm of possibility for her.
And what's really important, I think, is that it can't be something that you tell the other person. You have to accompany the person in their discovery of that. Because if I would have told her, how can you say that? You're very smart, you're very bright. It's not the same as realizing it by examining your own experiences and what they mean.
Yeah, and of course that has implications for parenting as well.
Yes.
You know, with children, we often tell, oh, you know, they come home from school and they say, oh, you know, I can't do math, or you know, nobody likes me. And then you say, no, you can't do math. You're great at math, and look, everyone likes you. And instead of telling them that, which is not very effective, rather elicit narratives, elicit stories.
Exactly. And that's where I think we can draw from certain skills on how to do it. I was thinking along the way, you don't really need any special techniques to be involved and transform stories. We do it all the time when we speak to each other. But there are certain ways of inquiring or ways of having conversation that can make that either more powerful or faster. I was remembering the work of Jerome Bruner, who said that he's one of the people that brought the narrative metaphor to the world of psychology. And he says that all good stories, like a good novel, take place in two landscapes. One is the landscape of action, what characters do, and the other the landscape of meaning, you know, which, as the name says, is what does it mean, what does it say about the person. So one simple way to think about this is that when you are having a conversation in a context, either as a therapist or as a coach, it's important to find out about the actions of what people do and what that means or says about them. So in this situation I was telling you about, maybe, well, what did she do? Well, she actually organized the other people to sort donations differently in a more efficient way. So that's what she did. And what does that mean about herself? Well, that I have an efficient mind. And did anybody else notice it? What did they think about that? So it kind of enriches. It's a constant zigzagging between our actions, sometimes even not just our actions, our thoughts. How did you prepare for that? Or what plans do you have for the future? And linking it to what's valuable to people's values, their dreams, their hopes.
So what are some of the exercises then that I can do, short of going to a narrative therapist who's steeped in positive psychology? What are some of the exercises that I can do at home in order to tell better, more empowering stories about myself?
Well, one probably very well known is called externalizing, and it has to do with separating yourself from obstacles or from problems. So instead of saying, you know, I am disorganized, start to think about disorganization in your life and how disorganization has an effect on you and how you relate to that. So that puts a certain distance. People often say that when you think that I am depressive or I am disorganized or I am impatient, it's like that's who you are. It's very hard to change.
Okay, now you're getting personal.
Oh, I'm sure you're not disorganized now.
No, I'm not disorganized, but there are disorganized things in my life. You told me to dissociate.
Okay.
Yes, I am disorganized. So let's work with that.
Okay.
So what do I do now? Because I really do see myself as a disorganized person.
Well, maybe I would ask you, you could ask yourself, if this organization were a character, a thing, or an object, what would it be like? What would it look like? Would it be
a mess?
A mess, okay.
Yes.
Would it be like a vague, diffuse mess, or would it be more like a
vague and diffused.
Vague and diffused.
Yes.
And how does this organization seep into your life? Does it arrive all of a sudden? Does it kind of...
it creeps in on me.
It creeps in
yes.
on you. Okay.
It's sinister.
It's sinister.
Yeah, it has claws.
Okay.
That's...
Okay. And what does this organization have any effects on your work life, for example?
Yes, I feel that when my room is disorganized, my thinking is actually less focused and organized.
Okay. Does disorganization also creep into your relationships in some way?
It upsets my wife.
Oh.
Yes,
okay.
and also I'm not being a good role model for my kids.
Okay. Okay. So this may seem obvious, but what do you think about these effects?
I'm not happy about them. Not happy about them at all.
Okay. And have you noticed what invites disorganization into your life?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I try to do many things, and organizing is not my top priority. So if I was living on my own, yes, it would affect my, my maybe ability to think clearly. But it's a price I'm willing to pay. But now that I'm living, with a family, it's really something that I do want to work on to bring more organization.
Okay, and you say that having too many things to do makes you vulnerable to disorganization,
yes.
so to speak. Okay, and can you think of a time recently when you're able to keep disorganization at bay, or make it smaller?
Yeah, when I did put time aside recently, actually, to tidy up my room, and I threw out many things, gave away many books, and it actually felt good. It didn't last that long.
Okay, okay. And did anybody notice that you were able to do that?
Yes, I got complimented by my wife. My kids, I think, were surprised. But another interesting thing happened then. My daughter just on her own accord started organizing her room.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So I was thinking you could have like an anti-disorganization team or an organization brigade or something like that. Okay. So, and what does it say to you when you realize that at least on that occasion you were able to keep this organization at a certain away from you? What does that make you think?
Well, first of all, that I can do it, and that it's a question of prioritizing, really, more than anything else.
Does organization, does it fit or is it congruent with something that's other important values in your life?
Organization?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With what?
Yeah, clear thinking, respect for others.
Okay.
Respect for myself as well.
Okay. Would keeping that in mind help you deal with
this? It is helping me, actually, as we're talking. And I'm thinking that it doesn't take that long to organize if I divide and conquer. So if I let my room disintegrate into real disorganization, and I know how to make it real, then organizing it takes a lot of time. But if I dedicate even 5 minutes at the end of each day just to put things back, I think that can do the work.
Before we move on to something else, I was imagining if we had like a pie chart of your space and your work, how much would you say has been taken over by disorganization?
Well, probably 10–15%.
Oh, that doesn't sound like a lot to me. How much would you like to reduce it to?
I would like to reduce it to not non-existent. I don't think that's realistic, but below 5%.
Below 5%.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. And that day when you mentioned that you took some time and your daughter even started to emulate you, how much progress did you make in that reduction?
A lot of
A lot?
progress.
So
yes.
right now it's at what? Is it at 5% right now?
Oh no, it's back to 10 to 15.
Okay.
Because that was the other day.
Okay.
You know, a lot has happened since then.
Okay. Well, I don't have a
in the world of disorganization.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. It's so nice of you to open up and do this in front of millions of people.
I hope millions of people.
Yeah. So what we just experienced is, what was it like for you? Instead of saying that you're disorganized, to talk about disorganization, what was this like for you?
So first of all, just obviously talking about it made me look at it and at me from the outside. Mm-hmm. And first of all, it didn't seem as ominous and difficult. Mm-hmm. It became a lot more manageable, and especially given the fact, I remember that I did it a few days ago. There's no reason why I can't do it again. So it did make it a lot more accessible. But the proof is in the pudding. So I'll update you on the state of my room.
Well, I'm sure this organization is a stubborn fellow. It will take more than once. But all your work with rituals and habits, for example, I'm sure will help that.
Yeah. What other exercises do you have in your room?
So that's one, not to think about yourself as problematic, but to separate yourself from the problem. Something else that is very helpful, I think, is to look at your strengths and examine the stories of the story or the stories about your strengths. Just yesterday, I was at a workshop with Ryan Nemick. I know he's going to be one of your guests, and it was really beautiful. He left us a reflection exercise, which was to think about where your strengths come from. And even though I thought I knew about my strengths and I thought about them a lot, it did help me realize, and I saw a connection with my family and even all the way back to my grandparents and their story and how it linked to my parents and to my own story. So to think about where the best of us comes from and not just to focus on what's problematic in our lives.
Yeah, because if you think about, I bet, there are millions of people going to therapists, and most of the time they spend talking about how they inherited their anger from something that their father did, or their lack of self-confidence from something that the teacher told them in 3rd grade. And we are, all of us, I think, have dozens and dozens of stories of where the worst in us came from. But very few of us have narratives around where the best of us comes from.
You reminded me, I'm a family therapist, and an important part of the training of family therapists is called family of origin work. And you usually spend like a very intensive time doing your genogram, that's like your map of your family. And oftentimes you look at what patterns have been passed down, and it's almost always in terms of pathology. So I know I'm not the only one, but there's other colleagues as well, that now when we work with students who are training to be therapists, we like to make it a more balanced genogram, and also to include what values have been passed on, what strengths have been passed on. What do you want to keep from that heritage, and what would you like to change? But to make it more balanced, just like positive psychology is about balance.
And I'm sure that also improves the relationships with our parents or grandparents.
I've had clients tell me that too, that to do a genogram that way, to look at the strengths of their families, also makes them feel more compassionate and closer to their parents.
Wonderful. So one more exercise or question that you recommend we ask of ourselves.
Okay, well, another one has to do with what are your hopes and dreams for yourself? What do you value the most? Because as you know, when we live in a way that's congruent with our values, we are happier. And a lot of times it's painful to live in an incongruous way. So one thing that I like a lot about narrative work is that it puts forward the notion of our preferred self, that we have options, and you can be within limits, of course, but you have options as to how you would prefer to be. So I think another useful thing to do is when you feel you're at a crossroads or you're facing a dilemma, one of the elements of the decision making can be, how would I prefer to be? how would I like others to, if this was somebody was telling the story of this decision, what would I like that story to be about?
So you were talking earlier about stories about our past. Where does the strength come from? Now you're moving and telling a story of the future.
Right.
And that also reminds me of what you spoke earlier about a therapy session. Let's start with your passions. What's going well in your life, your strength. Let's establish the foundation, a positive foundation,
Right.
and build on that as we
Right.
build the future.
And also, one question that comes from solution-focused work is very useful, is from the first session. So let's say you and I decide to work together for a few sessions, and this really helps you. You can say this was a really good experience. How will we know? What will be different? So that way people are already imagining a possible future, and it's useful in terms of where we want to head towards, but it imbues a sense of hopefulness.
By showing you, by imagining the possible. Well, I can imagine many possible positive paths coming from speaking with you. Thank you very much, Margarita.
You're very welcome. My pleasure, Tal. Thank you.
And thank you for watching Happier TV. Please visit us for more interviews right here.